Hi everybody, I'm happy to be with you again. This week we're going to speak about probiotics, the microbiome, and even prebiotics, and how this all relates to bone health. It's so interesting when you think about it. We now know that 90% of the cells in our body are bacteria. They aren't human cells, and 90% of our genes are bacteria. I often like to jokingly say we're like a walking compost heap. We're a lot of bacteria, 10 times as many more bacteria, 10 times as many more bacterial genes than human genes. Largely, these are in the intestine, particularly the colon and the large intestine. And in fact, there's about 3 pounds of bacteria in the gut. 100 trillion bacteria and more within the body. But it's not just the gut. Overall, we probably have 32 million bacteria per every inch of skin. So you take 1 little inch of skin, it's hard to believe, but there's 32 million bacteria on that 1 little inch of skin. The navel, where we don't often wash so much, the navel has probably 2,500 species of bacteria, many millions of bacteria just in your little navel. What do these bacteria do? They help digest food, they create nutrients in the body, they help to create a balance in the gut so that our intestine is healthier and prevent leaky gut. The bone health story we're going to see is related to leaky gut, proteins leaking through the gut, getting into the white blood cells, getting into the blood system, and the white blood cells attacking them, causing inflammation in the body. As I've mentioned several times, osteoporosis is largely related to inflammation. So what they found in the recent study that I reported on in last week's blog is that with mice, when they gave them probiotics, they found that they were able to improve the health of the bones. And that was because they were able to reduce the inflammation that was induced when these mice became estrogen deficient. Estrogen does many things, but one of the things it helps to keep the gut healthier and reduce the leaking of proteins and other materials through the gut. So with these mice, they gave them probiotics, they had better bone health. And I'm going to show you there's been some other studies like this with humans, but not with probiotics, but with prebiotics, the food for these bacteria. But let's take a second and remind ourselves of the favorite probiotics. You've all heard of sauerkraut. We think of it very commonly. Now the really neat thing that in practically every city around the country, people are starting to take to fermenting, and you'll have a local group that makes ferments. Like in Syracuse, we go to the farmer's market, there's people making sauerkraut. This is a delicious sauerkraut with actually garlic. There's people making true pickles. You know, I bet your kids have forgotten what a true pickle is. A true pickle is fermented. A lot of nice probiotics. Delicious thing to eat, but it must be fermented, and you'll often buy it in a bucket sitting out in open air because that's a true ferment that's been cultured. Kimchi, you all heard of this, maybe. This is an important probiotic that they used in Korea. It's cabbage, fermented cabbage. In fact, I had some Korean friends who were at the university here. I went to visit their house, and the first thing you see is this great big barrel. It was like a 50-gallon trash can full of cabbage and other elements that were out to the air fermenting. That's the first thing they did when they came, is make their kimchi so they could help themselves enhance their digestion. Every meal it was eaten. Kimchi is very nice. And of course, you know, the probiotics in yogurt, kefir, these are the ones we more standardly know. So the guideline is for bone health, try to eat a ferment frequently every day. Sometimes you can even find ways to have them every meal. So the probiotics are one thing. These are the actual bacteria. But then there's the question of feeding the bacteria. As it turns out, if you give fertilizer to these bacteria, if you give them things to eat, they will grow much more healthy and they'll stay in the gut. We take probiotics. I personally take them. It's a great idea. I eat fermented food. But the step before that is to give the body the food that these bacteria like, your bacteria companions. And these are called prebiotics, before the probiotic. And what they are is fibers, vegetable fibers, that the human body doesn't digest. And it's kind of been wondered, we always thought they were just roughage, they help move things through the intestine. But as it turns out, these fibers, these undigestible fibers, really are food for these bacteria. The bacteria ferment them, and they produce short-chain fatty acids, and those short-chain fatty acids then go on to produce butyrates, amongst other things, and these butyrates are very anti-inflammatory. It's the same butyrate that you get from ghee, which is a clarified butter, which traditionally was also cultured, also fermented. So the researchers have started looking at these prebiotics, and they found very interesting things. That they worked mainly with young children. One of the researchers is Connie Weaver, who's a colleague of mine, and she was able to take a fiber from corn, give it to adolescent children, and they actually enhanced their calcium absorption by 12%. And one of the suggestions is because they were able to absorb more calcium because of less leaky gut, and also these fibers change the pH, or these, let's say, the short-chain fatty acids change the pH in the gut, and that allows the body to absorb more calcium because less minerals are bound. The binding of calcium and minerals in the gut has to do with the pH of the gut. So acidifying the gut was helpful there. They also did a study with another type of ferment and found that on the one hand, calcium was absorption, and another study there was actually increase in bone densities. So this is very, very exciting to look at the foods another way, look at the foods that are going to help with the bacteria. So your logical question is, well, what are some of these foods that feed bacteria? Well, here's some of my favorite ones. This is Jerusalem artichoke or sunchoke. This is a fiber that's very much liked by the bacteria. We can't digest too much of it. It tastes almost like a celery. It's very innocuous. You can buy it in the stores. It also grows wild as a weed. Very nice, Jerusalem artichoke. Another more common one you probably see is asparagus. Asparagus has a very wonderful food for the bacteria. So eating plenty of asparagus. And leeks are very high. And this is a gigantic leek I just got out of our market. It helps to eat these raw, and it helps to eat the Jerusalem artichoke raw. And of course, with asparagus, you always want to steam it very lightly so it maintains all the nutrients. Some other more common prebiotic foods are onions. We all know them. Actually, onions are very important for providing many cofactors to the body. Quercetin, for example, which is great for bone. We try to have an onion a day, be great. And garlic. Garlic also is a very nice prebiotic. And you can almost be thinking all of those fibers that you have a hard time digesting, and like, for example, the sweet potato that we like, the skin will have a fiber that's hard to digest. Those are very likely going to serve well as food for the bacteria. Of course, don't eat anything that gives you indigestion, but be thinking about these prebiotic foods as well as the probiotic foods. So remember, we're largely bacteria. We want to treat our companions well. In fact, Deepak Chopra has said a really interesting thing. When he was talking about the microbiome, and the microbiome is the name we give to these bacteria that compose our body, he said the bacteria are just using the human body. The bacteria created the human body as a way to gain consciousness. Humans have a high level of consciousness. So it's almost like the bacteria got together and said, hey, we want to evolve. We want to be even smarter. We want to be more aware. Let's make a human body. And that's appeared like what they did. So let's see. That was our blog for this week. Let's see if you have any questions on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin looking at, the blogs every week and give you all a chance to ask your questions. This blog was on probiotics and prebiotics, so let's look at what questions you might have. They don't have to be just on this topic, but if they're on this topic, that's really great. Here's one question I have here. Oh, actually, this question came in from last week. And it's a question, can osteoporosis be reversed? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? In our little studies here, we were showing that with these probiotics, with healing the gut and reducing inflammation, they were able to increase bone density both in the animals and some of the human studies. So if we project this into someone who has advanced bone loss, like in osteoporosis, we can certainly see that these prebiotics and probiotics would be important. In our work at the Center for Better Bones, we have seen many people move out of having osteoporosis, as defined by bone density, being less than minus 2.5 standard deviations from the young person, and move into a bone density of just osteopenia or even normal. So it is certainly possible to reverse osteoporosis. If you look at the bone densities, we see them change a great deal. If you look at the bone structure, we see that certain things like the vitamin K product, the MK7 we use, builds stronger trabecular structure. This bone actually is stronger. Remember that if a person has advanced osteoporosis, if there's a lot of damage to the bone, you can't necessarily regenerate it all, but you can certainly gain stability of the bone. And the most important thing, if you want to reverse osteoporosis, is to look for the cause of the osteoporosis. We've seen many people lose their diagnosis of osteoporosis when they corrected their vitamin D, when they figured out that they had a loss of calcium in the urine and corrected it, when they realized that their low pH and lack of minerals was having a big impact. So remember, we have developed a whole, if you think you have excessive bone loss, you want to look at the whole series of secondary causes, possible causes of bone loss. You want to look at our medical osteoporosis workup, the tests that doctors do if they think there's excessive bone loss. You want to find the cause of the bone loss, and you certainly can do. We see many times it reversed, and you can certainly see it corrected. It's important to remember that as we age, the average woman is going to lose 45% of her muscle and 45% of her bone as she goes from 35 to 85. Our quest is to reduce that loss, to stabilize bone, which is in itself doing a lot, and then to begin to build bone. We first have to give all the nutrients, set the alkaline stage, do the exercise, and reduce stress. You'll notice in the Better Bones, Better Body program, stress reduction is really important because we're finding that the hormones of distress cause a lot of inflammation, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. It's very fascinating. The whole body's one single unit, and we must work on all the aspects of our health in order to have really excellent bone health and to recover bone health. Let's see, someone else asked, how accurate is the bone density test, what we call the DEXA? You know, that's a really interesting question. Those machines, you lay on them, they take a couple x-rays, then the technician charts certain lines and says this is where the bone begins, this is where the bone ends. They're very subject to error of the operator. And in fact, you've probably seen my earlier blog that Susan Ott, Dr. Susan Ott, a very famous physician who teaches doctors all about bone health in the West Coast, she put 100 people on her own machine, her own DEXA machine. This machine is highly calibrated. It's run for research. Same technician. She put them on the machine, walked them around the room, put them back on the machine, and says you need a 5 or 6% change to make sure it's just not variation in the operator procedure. That is a very high quality study of a very qualified person where those machines are carefully calibrated, perhaps like they might not be in your doctor's office. So we always take the bone density test with a grain of salt. We don't like to see them go down much. We know that a 5 or 6% change is probably significant. We often rely more on the bone breakdown markers that can show you what's happening right now. The NTX and others, we can talk about those at another time. And there's lots of information on that on the betterbones.com site. But just take them with a grain of salt, but we don't want to keep losing bone at a 5 or 6% rate. Let's see here. There is a question. I love these chats and I'm learning so much. My question now, how am I'm outside, now that I'm outside more, how much vitamin D do I need? You know, that's a really good question, because what happens is, if you live in a northern climate like I do, any place above Georgia, you're not going to be able to produce vitamin D during the winter months. And so we always like to test people maybe in February at the end of the winter, and then during the summer, towards the end of the summer. And many people can reduce their dose in the summer. And this individual says, look, I'm outside a lot now. So if you have your vitamin D test, we can gauge it, but just keep in mind, generally a reduction might not be bad of say 1,000 units. I always like to test vitamin D because you can know specifically what's happened. But here's the best part of the story. You will not produce vitamin D in the skin if you have enough in your in the blood from supplements. So it's, you know, you can't really easily overdose that way. And so you might get tested and see if you lower it a little. But it's very important always, we want year-round 50 to 60 level. And if you want another little gem, if you change that vitamin D by 1,000 units, it's like, take 1,000 units more, it's likely you'll go from 50 to 60. It's likely it'll increase 10 points. If you lower it by 1,000 units, it's likely it'll go down 10 points. So if you find you're high in the summer, you reduce your dose according to, you know, 1,000 units for every 10 units you want to lower it. I hope that was clear and you can make some sense out of that. Let's see. We have a question here. I've heard that a fresh egg left in lemon juice overnight, then you drink it the next morning. This is a French grandmother remedy that could it be harmful? You know, I lived in South America, and what they did is they would put that egg in lemon juice, like just set it overnight, eggshell and all, and then they would just blend that up and drink it. And it's very interesting that now there's quite a bit of research on eggshell as a source of calcium. And you know what else they found is that little membrane that the egg's in, that has a lot of growth factors. So yeah, that French grandmother remedy I think is a good one. The problem is, of course, with our industrial farms, sometimes the eggs are contaminated, sometimes, you know, there's sometimes cautions in using raw eggs. So if I did it, I'd make sure I knew the farmer and it was a very healthy chicken, and that there was no no infection going around with that chicken or that egg. Let's see. Oh my gosh, here's a question that's a really, well, let's take the probiotic question. I take a probiotic. Is that good as eating the foods? Can I take a prebiotic too? That's a really good question. What I try to do, and I must admit it's kind of a struggle, but I try to have some probiotic every day, and even every meal. A little bit if we can do it. You got the pickles, you got the sauerkraut, you got the kimchi, you've got miso, you've got tempeh, which is very nice. In the old days, they fermented things because we needed to store them. We didn't have refrigeration. And also, we I don't know, we somehow realized that we also ate a lot of food. Here's what I mean to say. We also ate a lot of food that was kind of spoiled because we didn't have refrigeration. And so we got many more of these bacteria. It's a great idea to eat a probiotic every meal. And I think personally, what I do is I've gotten some stool tests, and they look at, you have so much bifidus, so much acidophilus. They can test them right out. And if you find that you go off the supplement and you say, but this stuff, I lose my bacteria, it doesn't keep growing, and that's the problem. It doesn't have the food it needs. So I would always try to incorporate the prebiotic foods as well. And look at it, aren't these the nice alkalizing foods we talk about? Leeks, artichokes, onion, garlic, they're good for you in so many aspects. So you can look on the internet and see a long list. Chicory root is great, dandelion is great. So yeah, I would do both. Probiotics in supplements, we suggest about 40 billion a day. At least there's now formulas that have 50, 60 billion. Physicians are using very high dose. And then I would do these foods that are prebiotic. There's some prebiotic supplements now. We're looking into those, but it's really great to use the foods because they have so many antioxidants, so many plant compounds. Yep, that's a very good idea. Let's see, this other question is about Prolia. Is Prolia a good thing or bad thing? Well, it's not a question of being a good thing or bad thing. Prolia is a drug that halts bone breakdown by a mechanism that's different than the bisphosphonates. It is stronger than the bisphosphonates in the sense that what these drugs do is they halt bone breakdown. But whenever you halt bone breakdown, you also halt bone buildup. And this is why people get in trouble, because the bone almost like goes to sleep. It doesn't repair itself. Right now in your body, there is 1 million spots where old pieces of bone are being eaten up by bone breakdown cells, and new pieces of bone are being put down. And that happens at 1,000,000 spots in the body at every minute because the bone needs to be renewed. It constantly develops little fractures. It becomes weak. So the body, in all its wisdom, starts breaking down old pieces and building new pieces. That's one reason why we need all these nutrients, because we need a lot of nutrients and a lot of energy to constantly rebuild bone. So when you take these drugs, that process of breaking down bone and building up bone halts. Prolia is stronger than the other drugs. So on the one sense, doctors say, great, this is good. It halts bone breakdown more. It tends to look to preserve bone mass more. But you have the question, if you use it too long, that the bones may become weak. So Prolia, it's not that it's good or bad. It's just that we reserve, even thinking about bone drugs, in our mind, we try to work with nature to maximize bone health, to regain health of bone and the whole body. And we only think about these drugs if we simply cannot halt bone loss, or if a person doesn't want to do all the work. I mean, the Better Bones program has several steps to it. It's great because you build health of the whole body, but if a person doesn't want to do the work, or a person is having many fractures, and this is generally, I think the wise doctors are reserving these drugs for people who fracture. The interesting thing about fracture is that you cannot predict it by bone density. And we'll be talking about this in an upcoming blog, but about 70 to 80% of all fractures occur in people who have osteopenia or normal bone, not osteoporosis. So we're on a whole revolution of understanding what makes bone weak. It's not just bone density. Fracture is the proof of the pudding. And if you fracture, you want to take very strong measures, do your Better Bones program completely, and if you don't have success, that's perhaps the role of the drugs. Let's see if we have time for one more question. This question, one of the questions we have here is, am I familiar with TMJ? Sure, I mean, that's a temporal mandibular joint. That's a problem with the jaw. You know, the jaw muscle is the strongest muscle in the body. And talk about those fibers. I mean, we evolved with lots of tough food and chewing lots of fibers, and we have very strong jawbone, but sometimes that becomes misaligned. And it can be a great deal of discomfort, plus people often can't chew well. Many dentists have really specialized in this, and I would go to a dentist who deals with what they might call holistic or complementary, who stays away from the toxic materials in dentistry, like avoids mercury and whatnot. And you'll often find some that know how to adjust, and sometimes it has to do with adjusting the bite. We certainly know that all the nutrients that are related to building better bones are important for the TMJ. If you have a lot of pain, you might add quercetin in high dose, which we like. But that's a very specific thing, but your dentist can certainly help you do the baseline nutrients, alkalis, all that's very important. Let's see if we have one more question here while we have time. This is fun, because people are asking all sorts of different questions, not just about probiotics, but here's one. Is there a way of lowering blood pressure naturally by homeopathic products? Homeopathic products are very natural, and maybe one day we'll talk about that. It's a very refined medicine, and in Europe, it's the medicine of the queen. It's a very popular medicine. Doctors specialize in it. In this country, we think of homeopathy as kind of over-the-counter in the health food store, but there are professionals. It's my favorite kind of medicine. My homeopath is an Indian doctor from Mumbai who I consult with. Great medicine. But the blood pressure is really quite very interesting. The body wants to maintain blood pressure correctly. One of the things that can really help is the alkaline diet, because what they have discovered is that if you increase potassium foods, those fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, you lower the sodium, you get very good results with the blood pressure. And this diet was called the DASH diet, D-A-S-H. There's lots of information on the website. It was funded by the government to study because it is very effective. The DASH diet for blood pressure is very much like the alkaline diet. So, we have on betterbones.com, we have a list of potassium foods. The RDA for potassium, you know what it is? It's 4,700, the recommended amount. That's 5 times the dose of calcium. People only get half of that. If you got the potassium you needed, which would be roughly 13 servings of fruits, half-cup servings of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, you would do a great deal to correcting that blood pressure. The other thing that we can't avoid saying about blood pressure is that meditation is terrifically important. You've probably heard the relaxation response by Dr. Benson decades ago, who studied transcendental meditation, realized that he could get his patients to lower blood pressure with meditation. Meditation is a key part of our Better Bones program, and in fact we have produced a Meditations for Bone Health CD. Do those little meditations on a regular basis, alkalize, raise your potassium, and let me know how your blood pressure goes. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you all today. We're going to try to do these chats as much as we can on these Thursday afternoons, and we're going to talk about the blog frequently. So I'm suggesting, if you haven't signed up for my blog, go to betterbones.com and sign up. I'm going to present studies, research in the blogs, and then I'm going to chat a bit about them on the Thursday Facebook live chats, and then give people a chance to ask their questions about it. So sign up for the blog, and we'll have some fun trying to go a little deeper into all these issues of how we can maintain and maximize bone health and overall health. In the meantime, I send you all my very best wishes for your own good health. If your questions weren't answered today, we'll try to answer them next time. Or you enter them on Facebook and as a comment, and we'll get back to you. I wish you well. We'll talk later.